Hey guys, I wanted to make this video because it has been rumored that George Lucas is going to have new involvement in the Star Wars franchise. So I wanted to make this video and I wanted to talk about it. So I had read this article and I will try to find it and put the link so you guys can read the article. And I've heard this from other sources as well online that it's been rumored because of the awfulness of episode 9 that Disney is now reaching to George Lucas for help, basically, and is now reaching to George Lucas for involvement in the future of the franchise. And I read that it wasn't clear whether he was going to come back and direct. And when I was reading this article, it said that they basically want his involvement, but it wasn't clear whether that meant, it said that there was a possibility he could come back and direct, or what I got out of the article was that him to be a creative consultant for him to come up with the story. The article said that Disney wanted George Lucas to have involvement for future Star Wars films after the awfulness of episode 9. And I read this other article, and this was from MSNBC. And this article, so this is from a legitimate news source. This article said that because of episode 9, because of the way that it ended, and how the plot was, that so many Star Wars fans, that the Star Wars fan base is split. The fan base is completely divided, and that the only thing that has kept their franchise afloat is Baby Yoda. Like, that's literally what the article said. The article from MNBC said that Baby Yoda is the only thing that has been keeping the Star Wars franchise from not sinking. Baby Yoda has been keeping them alive. And the article that I read that was talking about George Lucas coming back and stepping in, it said that many fans have been like, this is not Star Wars episode 9, that what they consider Star Wars is what George Lucas did. The article went on about how episode 9 was lackluster, how it was very flat, and a lot of other film critics have said this, and I talked about this in my one video. Ones from Variety and Forbes and GQ said that for this to be like the conclusion of the Skywalker saga, that it was so like non-thrilling. Film critics said that it was not a satisfying ending. When I saw the movie, and I'm not just saying this because I hated episode 9, and if you watch my review video, you heard about how much I hated it and why I hated it. But when I saw episode 9, at the end of the movie, nobody clapped, and like no one in the theater clapped. And that was the first time I've ever seen a Star Wars movie in theaters and nobody clapped. Like, no one clapped. Every time I've seen a Star Wars movie in theaters, everybody would clap at the end of the credits when the credits would roll. And this was the first time that nobody clapped, nobody cheered. If you watched my review on the Mandalorian season finale, I talked about some news regarding the future of the franchise of Star Wars. And in that video, I talked about how the CEO of Disney officially apologized for episode 9 and how they were giving the franchise over to Jon Favreau, basically, and that he was going to lead it in the next direction in the films. So what I'm hoping for is that Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and George Lucas will collaborate together. I'm hoping that they will collaborate together and that they will fix it. I talked about this in my other video about how Jon Favreau said that Dave Filoni is the second person behind George Lucas that knows the world of Star Wars, that knows the lore of Star Wars, that is George Lucas's Padawan. George Lucas handpicked Dave Filoni to work on Clone Wars, and Dave Filoni did Rebels, and he said that he always wanted to continue the storylines that he did. He said he always wanted to continue them in George Lucas's vision. And Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau both write for The Mandalorian, and they are both executive producers. And Dave Filoni has directed a few episodes of The Mandalorian, so they have collaborated together, worked together, and they worked together on Clone Wars, and Jon Favreau voiced Pre Vizsla. So they have worked together for a long time, actually. And Jon Favreau has kept the same storylines from Clone Wars and Rebels in The Mandalorian. The dark saber is that's in the finale, season finale of season 1, the dark saber. So he has kept everything the same. So I'm hoping that the three of them will work together. I'm hoping that Dave Filoni and George Lucas will come up with the story for the next films. Maybe have Jon Favreau direct it. But I'm hoping that the three of them together will fix it. And a lot of fans for a long time, and I've talked about this before, but a lot of fans, including myself, have thought that Dave Filoni should have been the one writing the film scripts, been writing the story for the movies, because he knows the world and the lore besides George Lucas and has written storylines alongside George Lucas. So hearing these rumors about George Lucas returning and any kind of involvement and a creative involvement gives me hope. It makes me hopeful. The news about Jon Favreau makes me feel better. It gives me hope that this will get fixed. And I've said this before in my other video. I don't really understand how hard it was for them, not Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and George Lucas, not them. I'm talking about the people who did the movies, the new ones. I don't understand how hard it was for them to come up with a cohesive story. And I don't understand how hard it was for them to come up with a story that makes sense, because this material is all there. And I've said this before, that Dave Filoni has provided storylines. There are tons and tons of storylines that they could have picked from, that he's done for them, that would have made a lot of sense. And it's not like they really had to make up a new story. Like, these characters, the Skywalkers, have been around since 1977. Like, all the groundwork is there. It's not like they had to come up with a completely new story from scratch. And you can tell that they change things constantly, and that there really was not a solid story picked, which when you write a story, and I'm a writer, when you write a story, you might tweak some things here and there, but you have a basic idea of what the story is. And you can tell that they changed it several times, because For starters, in Force Awakens, when Han sees Rey, it's like he recognizes her and he smiles, right? And that always felt like, to me, I thought it was a hint that she was a Kenobi. And why would he, and Maz says, who's the girl? Like, Han knew who she was. Why would Han be smiling that she was a Palpatine? And the thing with the lightsaber, when Maz like, it calls to you, everybody said that it made sense that she was a Kenobi because Obi-Wan took the lightsaber from Anakin and then gave it to Luke, and it would be like completing the circle. Why would the lightsaber be calling to a Palpatine? That doesn't make sense. And I remember, that J.J. Abrams said, there were clues that she was, of who she was in Force Awakens. Well, there weren't any clues of her being a Palpatine in Force Awakens. Like, she was in the desert. The lines were exactly the same. When she says to BB-8, it's the same premise. So when Obi-Wan comes to the rescue of Luke, and there's R2-D2, and she comes to the rescue of BB-8, and then they had the exact same shots of Obi-Wan and Rey scaling the base, in Force Awakens and New Hope. And the whole mind trick thing, that was pretty much the same thing. And I've been to Disney World tons of times. And in the store, they used to play a loop of the fight sequence of Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mustafar. And and the loop of the other fight sequence that was playing at the same time, guess what it was? It was the fight sequence of Kylo and Rey. And they would have magazines in the stores where they would show the Star Wars characters on the cover, and Kylo was underneath Vader and Rey was underneath Obi-Wan. And it doesn't make sense with the whole Snoke thing, with Palpatine saying that Snoke was his creation. That was the case. Why was he having Snoke wanting to kill Rey in The Last Jedi? Because wouldn't he have wanted her to be brought to him because of the whole stupid non-Star Wars, non-lore, non-canon thing I've ever heard of, kill me so I can be an eternal Sith Lord nonsense? And also, if he had a son, couldn't he just suck the energy from his son? Why did it have to be Rey? Another big, huge plot hole. And if Rey is super powerful, wouldn't Palpatine's son be powerful? And it seemed like they got killed pretty easily. And even if they got killed, I would have suspected they would have at least put up a fight, would have been able to use the Force somewhat. And I feel like it would have been a cool twist if she would have been a Kenobi and a Palpatine. And in The Last Jedi, they had Obi-Wan's themes, and they had the part where the whole "help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," then it cut to Rey. So it made it seem like she was a Kenobi. And it would have made sense of her being a Palpatine, with Luke being scared of her power in that movie and how she didn't run away from the dark side and all of that. That would have made sense. And I would have been fine with her being a Palpatine if it would have been done in a good way and if it would have made sense, but it didn't make sense and it was stupid. I read many articles from different film critics that said they did not like the Palpatine reveal thing, that they didn't like it because it was so goofy. They didn't like it because of the way it was done and how many people wanted her to be a Kenobi. If they're smart, I don't know if they are. I know Dave and Jon Favreau and obviously George Lucas are smart, the one who created Star Wars. But if they're smart, they'll have it that her mother was a Kenobi, because you never knew who the mom was. The parents, you barely even saw the parents' faces. It was like 5 seconds of FaceTime of her parents. Like I don't even remember what they look like. But if they're smart, they'll pull an Avatar Last Airbender thing with Zuko with, I think it was his great-grandfather, when he learns about his great-grandfathers, and Uncle Iroh says, "You have 2 great-grandfathers, Zuko, your father's side, but your mother's side." So unless maybe they'll do something like that, and Dave Filoni did work on Avatar The Last Airbender. So I'm hoping that Dave, Jon Favreau, and George Lucas will fix all this, and the news of all this, like I said before, it makes me feel better, it makes me hopeful. They could, especially with the shows, and I've talked about this before, they could take the time to figure out how they're going to fix all of the stupidity of episode 9, and they could have Baby Yoda, Mando, the Mandalorian, and Ahsoka in a movie. They could easily have a film with Rey and Kylo. I have seen so many fan threads, so many fan posts of people who have talked about how Kylo could be alive because we didn't see him as a Force ghost. And it's all things that have made sense. It's all theories that have made sense and that apply to Star Wars. People have talked about how he's in the world between worlds, and how they could use the Mortis arc. And even if Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley just showed up for one movie, and I just want that fixed. I just want Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and George Lucas to fix Kylo and Rey and have them be together. And a lot of fans loved that. And Dave Filoni, I think, was going to connect all that because he had the voices of Kylo and Rey in the world between worlds. And I feel like Rian Johnson actually did try to keep The Last Jedi close with the Star Wars lore. Like, I definitely think Dave Filoni should have been the one writing the movies, but I do feel like he at least tried, because he had references from the originals and the prequels, and the whole dialogue of Kylo and Rey is the same of Anakin and Padme. There was music from the prequels in The Last Jedi, and he talked about the whole spiel of Luke saying Palpatine was right under the Jedi's noses, and Yoda saying time it is for you to stop with these old books, and basically for the Jedi to change, and Kylo talking about the Jedi and the Sith and him mentioning the Sith. So I do feel like Rian Johnson did try. Like, I felt like he was more close to the lore 1,000 times more than J.J. Abrams. And like I said, this shows how none of it was connected, that with the concept art for The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson talked about how there was the idea of a Sith ghost coming out of a mirror, which that is close to, that is Star Wars lore. And that's why I thought that was the direction I thought they were going to go in episode 9, and they didn't. Instead, we got stupid things like Snoke inside a jar. And I remember Andy Serkis had said in an interview that Snoke had a past, so that didn't match up with that stupid thing. And I remember when they were talking about the movies, and at the time, I thought this was just a poor marketing technique when Kathleen Kennedy said that they allowed Rian Johnson to do whatever he wanted with The Last Jedi. And that's what they did with J.J. Abrams. And I remember thinking, oh, well, that's just a bad marketing technique, because I think this was me being optimistic, or trying to be optimistic. And I was like, because, oh, there's concept art, there's a plan, and there's no way that you would just give a franchise that's worth so much money to a director and be like, hey, do whatever you want with it without a cohesive plan. Now, I think Rian Johnson did a million times better job than J.J. Abrams, and would have given a 10 times, would have given a much, much, much better ending than J.J. Abrams. I still think Dave Filoni should have written the films, but I think Rian Johnson would have done a way better job. That's an understatement. I don't believe he would have given a stupid ending. And it never connected with the vision of Kylo and Rey, because it suggested that Rey was going to turn to the dark side and he was going to turn to the light side. And we never saw what that vision was. And so they didn't connect that. And when Rey said, I saw your future, we didn't know what the future was. And when she says, I saw your future as clearly as I see you now, it was solid and clear. That's the same lines that Anakin said to Padme. So Rian Johnson did try. And another huge thing that they didn't keep or change was in the beginning, so Force Awakens, when Rey has that helmet on, and they said this in a concept art book, and they said this in, like, I think the novelization, Rey's helmet, the last name was Rey, and it was a rebel pilot's helmet. So she named herself Rey, and then in episode 9, her parents were still calling her Rey. So that was completely changed. Originally, Rey was not her name. So I'm hoping that Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and George Lucas will fix it. They'll fix the ending. And because nobody wanted to see Rey. You have the lonely girl alone, walking in the desert alone, the one who's been lonely her whole life, and the poor, tortured guy who's been alone and he's finally happy, and then you have him disappear, and you have these two lonely people find love with each other, and you have all these characters die, Han, Luke, Leia, just for him to, and like I said before, I've seen valid theories that people have posted in ways how he could be alive, that Leia gave him his life force. Like I said before, the World Between Worlds arc, the Mortis arc. And a lot of people were saying this, and it's true, that redemption doesn't always have to mean death. And I've talked about this before. I've used them as an example before, Marvel, because they had an amazing ending for their cinematic universe. With Marvel, like Nebula, she redeemed herself, and Nebula didn't die. Bad Nebula died, but not Nebula. And Loki, who I feel like is very similar to Kylo, he didn't die. He did, but then he went through with the cube. And I didn't know this, but the director of Thor Ragnarok directed the season 1 finale of The Mandalorian, and when I realized that, I was like, oh, this makes sense. That's why this was so good and so funny, and makes sense because Jon Favreau being involved in Marvel. And I was like, the Marvel people just need to take over Star Wars. And the whole thing of Kylo just showed how no originality, that you had to copy and paste the same thing with Vader. And film critics said that they said that, and they talked about how the newest trilogy was the least creative, least original of all the trilogies of Star Wars. So before I close, what I think that they could do for a film is, and I've talked about this in my other video, I think what they could do for a film is they could have Rey find the other Force users. In Clone Wars and Rebels, there have been Force-sensitive kids who have been kidnapped by bad guys. That's been a reoccurring theme. And that's the storyline of Mandalorian, is the Mandalorian is trying to keep a Force-sensitive child safe. And in the end of season 1, his new quest is to either get Baby Yoda to his race, who are Force users, or to find a group of Force users. And in Rebels, Ahsoka says that the Jedi were once around to protect the Force-sensitive kids, and since there's no Jedi anymore in Rebels, they said Kaden says that they need to protect the Force-sensitive children. So that theme has been reoccurring, and also in the newest Star Wars Jedi Knight Fallen Order video game, they talk about finding the Force-sensitive kids and restarting the Jedi Order. So what a new movie you could do is you could explain that. You could show Rey find the other Force sensitives and explain where they've been all this time and clean up the mess of episode 9. And you could bring back Rebels characters. You could bring Ahsoka. Like I said, you could have Baby Yoda grown up. You could have Mando. You could have Ezra. And introducing Ezra can bring up the World Between Worlds arc and bring back Kylo. So Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and George Lucas are our only hope, and hopefully they can bring back peace and order and balance to the Star Wars universe. I'll be in my 30s by then, but anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, please like it, and please subscribe. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.